It's a great, great joy to be back here. Devi and I are announcing as we travel through India that we're no longer visitors to India, but that we're living in India part-time. And so we're making that shift to be really more present here. Honestly, India feels more like our home than anywhere. But now, much like Swamiji in the last years of his life, we really don't have a place that we're going to call our home and that we visit elsewhere. The whole world now is our home, and India is certainly a very, very strong part of that.
Jyotish, the singers had a song.
We can do it whenever you want.
Oh, I think we want it now. Well, I'll introduce Devi and myself for the few of you who may not know us. We have been with Swami since the very beginning of Ananda. I actually met him in 1966, which was before the founding of Ananda, and had a chance to be in on all of the adventures that we have had throughout all of those years. And naturally, for all of us, we're feeling pain and a loss with Swamiji's passing in April. You'll have to excuse me. We led a pilgrimage through Italy in this last month, and many of the pilgrims had coughs and colds, and I held it off during the whole pilgrimage, and then now it seems to have caught up with me. So if I cough a little, just ignore the interruptions. But we obviously are feeling Swamiji's loss, but on the other hand, I've heard from many, many, many people that they feel him more with them now than they ever did before. And Master said the same thing when he passed away. He said Swamiji had asked him about, will you be with us when you leave? And Master said, beautiful line, he said, for those who think me near, I will be near. Really what that means is that these great souls are now in the omnipresent. And when they're in a physical body, to a certain extent, they're constrained by that physical body. And certainly we, as their followers, their disciples, are constrained in our thinking that that physical body is who they are. And then when the shell is no longer there, then we can overcome our delusion that they are contained by time and space. They never were, but it's harder to realize that when you're looking at someone. Swami, one time with Master, was having these same thoughts, and is he in that body? Is he in the cosmos? Where is he? And Master, who knew all of Swamiji's thoughts, just looked at him very sweetly and handed him an apple, as if to say, I'm everywhere, and here's an apple. So let's have the singers come up and do their song.
And this is one of his earlier songs. He had an incredible gift for channeling a wide variety of music, from songs that are Indian bhajans to folk songs to tremendous choir pieces and orchestral pieces and beautiful sweet duets. And so it's hard to give you a sampling of everything, but we're, and I can't tell you which ones are my favorites because they all are so deeply, deeply moving and inspiring. So the words are on the sheet of paper that you have. This one is called If You're Seeking Freedom. And as I said, it was one of his earlier songs.
If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, or if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before.
If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, or if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there.
For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care.
And if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, or if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there.
For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere.
But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires. Why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere.
For never can you buy it, grasp and you'll deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains, 'cause sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.
This morning we're going to talk about the mission of life, and this has both a personal aspect to it and a more universal aspect to it. I'll just give you a little forewarning. I'll speak for about a half hour, and then Devi will speak for about a half hour, and then we'll have some time at the end of the class for questions. And if the questions are good, we might even have some answers for them. So, when we consider the question of what is the mission, we really have to refer back to the individual, because we could talk cosmically about this subject and give kind of wise teachings and quote scripture and so on, but what would that mean to you and me? What does it mean to our life as we live it right now? And so that very personal mission is the one that's most important to us. Now, that personal mission is always the same for everyone because of the way that the universe is created. So there's automatically a cosmic element to it. So God creates the universe by extending his consciousness out into creation. It's not done from outside, where there is a God up in heaven that's separate from his creation, just as a potter is separate from the mud or the clay that he makes with the pot. Rather, God dreams the universe into existence. And in fact, that's why Master said that the spiritual purpose of dreaming is to show us how God creates the universe, because we at night create our own little universe. So God sends out all of the creation as a kind of dream, but his dream has a consistency that lasts much longer than our dream. Now, if we were dreaming at night and never woke from that dream during the whole lifetime, how would we know whether we were dreaming or not? We really wouldn't. And so God has the consistency in this lifetime of holding it together in such a way that we until we're realized, we never wake up from that and see clearly, oh, it was all just a dream. Rather, we're mesmerized, we're caught in that dream. The power of Maya, the power of delusion, keeps us caught there. Now, the goal of life for everyone is to wake up from that dream and realize that we're not an individual character in the dream, but rather we are the dreamer itself, himself, herself, however we define that. And as the dreamer, then we can see that not only are we the little character in the dream, but we're the whole dream itself. And in samadhi, in the great cosmic consciousness, we feel our unity with everything. And so the real question is, the real answer to the purpose of life is to wake up from that dream. The real question is, how do we do that? Now, God puts into play another element, and Master said this was the thesis of his first book, The Science of Religion. He said that everyone in the world is driven by the same basic motivation, and that basic motivation is the desire to be happy and to avoid pain. And then there are millions, probably billions of varieties of how we seek happiness and what we do to avoid pain. And they go all the way from the answer to how to be happy is to go out and get drunk and get in a fight. That feels good. That's a very low level of consciousness. At the highest level of consciousness, the answer to how to be happy is to maintain the consciousness always of our unity with God. And in between, there are 1,000 million variations on that theme. But if you will pause at night especially and look at the events of the day, you will see that everything, all of your desires, all of your actions, everything was driven by the aspect, this motivation of how to be happy. What you ate this morning, you ate that because you thought that that food was going to make you happy. You wouldn't have translated it that way. You ate because you were hungry. But hunger is the other aspect of wanting to avoid pain. There's a little pain in hunger, especially if it gets severe. So we want to avoid that, so we eat. And then we eat, we're satisfied, we're happy. We overeat, we're sick, we're unhappy. And on and on and on it goes. But always what is behind the drama is us waking up from that cosmic dream. One time, a few years ago, we were with Swamiji, and Devi and I were basically asking the question, why does it take so long to get out of delusion? Because we ourselves have been very sincere disciples for over nearly 45 years now, and we've seen really thousands of sincere disciples, and it just seems to take a while to break this delusion that we're not the dream, but the dreamer. And we were asking Swamiji, why does it take so long? And he answered very, very succinctly. He said, understand this. The whole of the spiritual path is to overcome the ego. Now, the ego is that Master defined the ego as the soul identified with the body. Or we could think of it as when you dream at night, in your nightly dream, there is one character in that dream that you think of as you. And all the other characters, even though you're creating them, you think as not you. Isn't that true? Isn't that the way a dream works? So the whole goal of it is to break that delusion that you're only that one person. That one person represents the ego principle, the soul identified with the body or the personality. And so the whole of the goal of life is to break that delusion, to get out of ego. And then he said, and this was, I think, partly particular to Devi and me, but partly universal. He said, and the way to do that is by longer and deeper meditation and by seeing God as the doer of everything. And so those two principles will help us break the delusion. But so on an individual level, that is our mission, is to break the delusion of the ego and the separation that we feel, because we will never, ever be satisfied until we do that. We will always have a hunger. As Patanjali said in his Yoga Sutras, in the second one, he said, or the third one, he said, talking about he said, yoga is the neutralization of chitwa, or Master interpreted that as primordial feeling nature, the likes and dislikes that we have. When all of that is neutralized, because that's what keeps us in delusion, we automatically snap out, we wake up. And then Patanjali said, when the seer is in that state, he rests in his own self. And so in that state, we're completely fulfilled. Then the next one, he says, when he's not in that state, he is subject to the modifications of Maya. And so when we don't rest in our own self, when we haven't broken the bonds of ego, we're always driven by the modifications, and we're always looking at what is going to make us happy, what is going to help us avoid pain, and according to how we answer that question, our life will be defined. If we decide that what will make us happy is to become rich, then our life will be defined and our motivation will be driven by the desire to make money, to do business, to make deals, to watch our stock account, or as it said in this, cast away desires if you're seeking freedom. And otherwise, the rich man is, even when it's sunny, he'll be counting money. See, it's just that way, according to what we define in this lifetime as the primary thing that will provide us with the happiness we're seeking. That will determine the flow of our life. And Master said that we always have a kind of subliminal tape playing in our mind, that we're always kind of evaluating things, and that tape just plays again and again and again. Or as another person put it, for the pickpocket, all he sees in a saint is his pockets. And so that tape is always playing a little bit, and it's like a lens that we don't even realize is there, but we wear, and it provides a coloration. Now, we won't be happy ever until we rest in our own self, until we overcome the delusions of ego. And it isn't vague. You know, when you talk in terms like this, you kind of think, well, what does it mean, rest in your own self? Isn't this my own self? Well, not really, no. What is your own self? Well, Adi Shankara defined that as Satchidanandam. The essential qualities of God are existence, consciousness, and bliss. So ultimately, Master said that first of all, we start out by seeking happiness. But gradually, as that happiness becomes more and more refined, we realize that what we're really seeking is bliss, the bliss of the own self. And when we rest in that bliss, then we're satisfied. Ananda Ma, the great woman saint, said that the natural food of the mind is joy, and we will always be hungry until we feast on that joy. And so, ultimately, the only thing that will satisfy us is finding joy. And so that finding of joy, finding of our own true nature, is our individual mission. So then the question comes automatically, so how do we do that? If that's what's there, well, then it gets complicated, because how we do it is diverse. It changes for every single person, because we all have our own pathway. One time Swamiji was doing a Kriya initiation, and as he was blessing people in the Kriya initiation, he said afterwards he had a very strange experience that he had never had before. He said that as he blessed each individual, he could feel their individual pathway to liberation, and it was different for every person. And so that individual pathway is different for each of us, but it has certain common elements. Even though it's expressed differently, it has certain common elements. The first is, and I've already quoted Patanjali, the first is we have to undertake some kind of a practice or a cluster, a galaxy of attitudes that allow us to be released from the likes and dislikes. Yogashram vritti nirod. Yoga is the neutralization of the primordial feeling nature, chitwa, nirod, the whirlpools of that. And that those likes and dislikes, so we have to undertake some kind of practice that allows us to be released from that. And that practice always includes going within ourselves and lifting up the energy. Now, in times past, I want to talk a little bit about the yugas, but I don't want to break this thought yet. In times past, that mode of becoming aware seemed to lie outside of ourself. But one of the things that Master and this age, we have entered into a new age, a Dwapara Yuga, and I'm not going to break and talk much about the yugas, but it's important to understand that we have come into a new age, and this age is of energy. And so the worldwide understanding of how we work on this question of overcoming likes and dislikes is going to be answered in terms of energy. And ultimately what that means is that not just the energy of electrons and internet and cell phones and all of that, that's part of it, but that's the outward expression of it. The inward expression of it, this age of energy, is how do we control the thoughts and emotions and restlessness of our own nature and the restlessness of the mind. How do we control that? Because until we do, we won't rest in our own selves. We won't break that delusion. We won't neutralize the whirlpools of Chitwa. And so this path that we have has a universal aspect and a particular aspect, and I'll touch a bit on that also. The universal aspect is that Master and this line of avatars has come to bring basically a new understanding of how enlightenment is achieved at this time for mankind. Devi and I were just on a pilgrimage, as I said, to Italy, and it was very interesting because we visited during that pilgrimage Rome, and we saw some of the ancient artifacts of Rome, and then we visited Florence, Italy, where the heart of the Renaissance. Now, why is that interesting and pertinent to this? It's because those two civilizations came into their power at the changing of the yugas. So ancient Rome came into existence almost exactly at the time that the world was going through the change from Dwapara Yuga, which we're now back in a downward cycle, It was the highest age is Satya Yuga, then Treta Yuga, then Dwapara Yuga, then Kali Yuga. And in each of those ages, mankind has less clarity of consciousness, less automatic unity and understanding of our divine nature. And so at the change of Dwapara Yuga into Kali Yuga, the change of consciousness worldwide went from energy and mantra, and when we read in the great scriptures, the Mahabharata, the Battle of Kurukshetra took place right about at that change of ages, coming out of Dwapara Yuga. And so the change of consciousness came deeply into form, and the Romans were masters of form. We were drinking water that we would get out of fountains that poured the water, and that water was clear and drinkable, unlike in many cities. And that water came through aqueducts that were 2,000 years old, that were built by Roman engineers, masters of building. We went into a beautiful structure, the Pantheon, one of the most powerful structures I've ever been in. And its ceiling is composed of precast concrete, kind of forms that were then lifted into place, and of varying thickness, and it's a huge dome, all done by ancient Roman engineers. They, as I say, they were masters of form, and they were masters of form not just on the physical level, but on other levels. They brought into existence very strong law and regulation, so the form of how we behave. And the Catholic Church came into existence at that time. Again, I don't want to go into it in depth. It's fascinating. We could have a week-long seminar just on the aspects of the yugas. But the time of at that time, these masters came into the world to bring a teaching that was more outward and more having to do with form. Formal prayer, this is how you pray. If you wanted to be spiritual during that age, because the mass consciousness was so dark, you had to leave the world and go, and the monasteries are little fortresses, and they're little cells, and they've got a wall around them to ward off the attacks that might come from outside, and you stayed enclosed in that, away from the pollution of the world on a mental level. But it's no longer that age. Then we also went to Florence, where that's the Renaissance, and at the time of the Renaissance, about 1500 or so, that's the beginning of the changeover into Dwapara Yuga. And during that time, there was a whole new understanding of how to behave, and that there's perspective, and that's when kind of more ego and self-centeredness came into art. And instead of kind of generalized portraiture, you saw very individualized portraits. You saw perspective come in. Again, I don't want to lecture on this, but I want to touch on it, because now in this age, this line of gurus, not alone, because this is a change that's worldwide, and there are other masters and other paths that also recognize this, that are valid. But for us, now the changeover has come, and that master especially has brought a particular spiritual path, because now we're in energy. He's brought a series of techniques that help us, first of all, become aware of the energy, the energization exercises, to control that energy flow, to send it and withdraw it from various parts of the body, to combine it with breathing or pranayama, because we aren't just sending outward energy, we're sending prana or life force. And so our path teaches the control of life force and how to move that. And when we learn how to control and how to direct life force, then we have the key to awakening. in this age. And that's why it's so important to practice meditation. Important, especially, of course, the primary technique of energy control is Kriya Yoga, the most inward. And that, again, Master said that it was not new. This technique is not new. It was reintroduced to the world. It was never lost because it has to do with the way that we're built. The real altar is not something outside of ourselves. The real altar is our own nervous system and our own consciousness. And it's within our own nervous system and within our own consciousness that awakening is going to take place. And so this introduction or reintroduction of the technique of Kriya Yoga, he said in the autobiography of a yogi, he quoted Ananda as saying this is the most powerful technique for liberation through self-effort ever given to mankind. Well, does that mean that, aren't we the lucky ones? It's the first time it was ever given? No. It was given, it's because it's universal. It's always been there. But due to ignorance and, as Master said, priestly secrecy, it had to be withheld by and large during the darkness of Kali Yuga. Now coming out of that, it is being reintroduced. And so that is a world mission that this line of gurus have come to bring, is the reintroduction of the path that works more with our own nervous system, less with outer forms. Devi ji was with Dhyana ji, and they were in some shop a couple of days ago, and the woman asked, "Why are you wearing the blue?" And Dhyana ji said, "Well, it's because we're a part of a religious order. We worship God." And the woman said, "Oh, which God?" And because that's, see, as if it goes out into form, the one unified God becomes which God? And we all know that there are religious wars that are fought because you're not worshiping my witch god, you're worshiping your witch god, and I'm going to have to kill you if you do that. What nonsense. So Dhyana said, Bhagavan. And, oh, that's fine then. But see, it's coming out, we're coming out of Kali Yuga, where form was important, into Dwapara Yuga, where form is not so important. In another way, it's like in Kali Yuga, the energy has decreased, and when energy decreases, temperature decreases, and if you have water, then if the temperature decreases sufficiently, that water freezes. And then you can take that water and you can cut it up into pieces, and you can put one piece here, and that's which god you worship, and another piece over here, and that's which god I worship. And you can argue about those because they're quite obviously separate. But you put them, you raise the energy, and they all merge. And part of what we're going through right now is the great fear of people who are still holding on to Kali Yuga forms, the fear that this new energy is going to somehow take them away, somehow take away my beliefs, the way of life that I've held and my grandparents have held. And so there's a fear, but it's a changing of ages. It's like a age of dinosaurs. One time, Devi had a beautiful, very amusing, but a beautiful line. Someone asked her, why is there so much energy and religious wars and darkness right now? And it's because of the old Kali Yuga form. They're like dinosaurs, but they're being motivated and energized by the awakening energy that's coming into the world. And so Devi said the line that everybody laughed and everybody always remembers. Now it's like dinosaurs on steroids. And so, but it'll all pass. That will pass because the age is melting those separate forms. Dwapara Yuga is melting it, and it's going to be water. In a higher age, it's going to be steam, and in a higher age yet, it's going to be everything. But right now, we're working with energy. So this line of gurus had the mission to bring this into existence, this new knowledge, bring it into existence, to re-clarify it, and to put it in such a way, in scientific terms, that people can understand. And Master was he taught in every aspect of life. He taught how to have proper relationships. And of course, Swamiji, as his disciple, has written books on all of these. Proper relationships, how to handle money, what the diet should be, all kinds of hundreds of talks, specifically how to apply these principles into our present day and age, our life as we live it. But we're always going back to that ancient puzzle of how do we reunify our soul with God? How do we wake from this dream? And so Master and this line of gurus have brought a particular teaching and a particular application. Remember I was saying about the monasteries in Kali Yuga, how you had to withdraw from the world and hide in your cell, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to maintain a spiritual motivation. In this age, that's no longer true. And we went to several monasteries in Italy that 200 years ago had 300, 400 monks or nuns living in them. And now there are a half a dozen old men or old women who live there. And they've turned them into places that pilgrims can come and stay. But that old form is beginning to withdraw. Now we have a monastery here, and the monastic consciousness is very, very important. Renunciation is essential, because without renunciation, no matter what your station in life is, without renunciation, you're not going to quell those whirlpools of Chitwa and awaken into union with God. And so we have to mentally release attachment. But it's the release of attachment. It's not the form of withdrawing. It's the release of the desires. And that kind of renunciation is very important for all of us. But so we come back around to these great masters had this mission to bring a reclarification of ancient teachings, but they also had a mission to bring about the understanding that we have to spiritualize every aspect of life, not to withdraw from it, not to push it away, not to define the spiritual path as the rules of which we must not do, those things which we must not do or must not desire. That's Kali Yuga thinking. Now, as Swamiji put it, our renunciation is samadhi affirming, not world renouncing or world denying, he put it, not renouncing. Not world denying, but samadhi affirming. And so this line of masters also brought that teaching to us. But our job individually now, as I said, first of all, is to awaken from delusion and to realize that we are one with God. And we have to do that by longer and deeper meditation, using these techniques that were given to us. Drawing on the power of God as expressed through the Guru, because what the Guru represents is not a person, not a personality, but rather the particular doorway that God has sent for each of us to enter. And that doorway, think of a large mall that has many entrances into it. you can come into that mall through any of those many entrances. But if you try to go through all of them at the same time, you just get confused and you're outside all the time. And so the Guru is the one entrance that resonates with our own soul nature, with our own long-determined patterns of, remember I was saying about Swamiji, feeling the particular pathway for each individual? Each of us have that pathway. And as part of that, we will find a particular teacher and teachings that resonate deeply with our soul, that we feel, oh, this really does feel like mine. And I know that many of us have had that experience. So we have to meditate longer and deeper, and we have to serve. Master said that meditation was, our path was meditation plus service. And this too is always been the case. I'll just end with this. We heard something that in this pilgrimage in India that I had never heard before. St. Francis really reoriented the Christian church in a proper direction of having not to do with worldly affairs, but having to do with connection with God and to service. But so he started a monastic order called the Franciscan order, and as part of that, he had eventually several thousand monks and nuns in his lifetime. But he had them in groups of 4, and he had what he called brother mothers and brother sons. And the job of the brother mothers was to serve the brother sons. So make sure, because they didn't, one of the aspects was they didn't have any money. They had to go out and ask for their food, recognition that Divine Mother feeds us. So they had to beg for the food. They had to, of course, do whatever it took to keep themselves alive. Well, that was the job of the brother mothers. The brother sons, their job was to meditate, to pray, to go into seclusion. And we went to many caves and areas where these great souls had spent months and years praying and meditating to God. And so the brother mothers took care of them, and the brother sons, their job was to become unified with God. And then they switched roles so that the brother sons became the brother mothers and took care of the others. But it's always there, this dual aspect of we have to commune with God and we also have to serve. And that's why Master defined his path as a combination of meditation and service. And we'll be speaking more about this, but I want to give Devi ji a chance.
Well, welcome everyone, and I want to also say how wonderful it is for us to be here. And I must say, we've been looking since we were here last year in January and February. I've been longing to come back. I've been so many of your faces have been in our hearts and minds, and it's just a joy to be back. One of my favorite statements that our Guru Yogananda ji made was, "The time for knowing God has come." What an incredible statement. Simple words, short, succinct. But what does that mean? The time for knowing God has come. Why now? And why has it just arrived? I mean, God is eternal. God is beyond time, beyond space. But what Master was saying in that was, right now we are living in a time, as Jyotish was painting a very big picture, of a change of consciousness for humanity. When we were in the city of Florence, or the Italians call it Firenze, you can still feel almost 1,000 years later, the excitement of those young artists as they began breaking through out of the limitation of the Middle Ages, where everything was just two-dimensional and the role of the individual was just not important. And you could feel the excitement of those young geniuses. Yes, it's fair to say that, but more than just individually talented individuals, they were able to tune in to emerging, expanded consciousness. And that's why, for those of you who have studied Western art at all, you go to see some of these great works of art in the Vatican Museum, the Pietà, which means compassion. And it's the Divine Mother in the form of Mary holding the body of her son, Jesus, after he's been crucified. Michelangelo did that when he was 22 years old, one of the greatest works of Western art. And how was he able to do that? Because if we think, well, he's a genius, he's different from us. If you look at people who have been on the spiritual path 45 years, you think, oh, they're different from us. Not at all. He was able to do it. The communities of Ananda and the devotees throughout the world are able to do it because we are tuning in to currents that are accessible to everyone, not just a few. And this is what's not the time for knowing God has come. It's a very exciting statement because Master Yoganandaji is saying, I am coming now. As paraphrasing the Bhagavad Gita, when virtue or dharma declines and evil or adharma is predominant, I will come again and again to reestablish this higher consciousness. And that's what Yogananda was saying. He was saying that he, along with the line of avatars that they've come throughout history again and again in the East, in the West, Master said that at Christ's birth in the West, you may be aware of this, it's shocking to Westerners, that the three wise men were Lahiri Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswar, and Babaji. And then, of course, those of us who have gone deeper into the meaning of Western religion, we know that Christ came to India and Tibet, and he studied the teachings of the great masters here, and he brought these back. You know, one of our friends in Italy, some of you may know him, Narya Tosetto, he's one of the core members of our community in Assisi. We asked him, why do you think so many, in all of the West, why so many saints were born in Italy? And he paused for a minute and he said something I had never heard anyone say before, but it just rang so true. He said, I believe many Indian yogis reincarnated in Italy because that is the heart of Christianity, to reinvigorate Christianity with the deep mystical traditions of India. And so why is the time for knowing God now? Because we have the opportunity. Not everyone's taking it. There's a very adamant section of the population that says, no, my way is right, my religion is right, my political position is right, my financial interpretation is right. But underneath that, and this is why there is great hope today, there is the emerging consciousness that there is a unity underneath it all, that all the world is coming out of a sense of separation. Swamiji often said that we can think of human different cultures and religions like little islands seemingly separated by the ocean of limited consciousness. But as that limited consciousness begins to recede, we see that it's one great landmass and it's all connected. And so we need to look, when we start to think, what is the mission of our masters? What is my mission? And then we get a little confused because we think, well, I don't think I'm important enough to have a mission. But you do. We all do. As Jyotish was saying, God gave each one of us the mission. And the one mission to merge our consciousness back with Him. And the rest is just details. The rest is just fulfilling our karma, fulfilling the responsibilities we have in the world. But underneath it all, we live in a time where the ability, even though it's a time of turmoil, the ability to turn our consciousness in an upward flowing direction is supported by the energy of higher powers right now. And these higher powers are, I've heard it said, well, where are the saints of today? The saints of today walk among us, and we often don't see them. But the great, like Babaji, Krishna Babaji, the deathless master in the Himalayas, he is in a body still, guiding the development of the planet. Master said, Yoganandaji said that during the Second World War, when it seemed like Hitler and the forces of Nazi Germany were going to conquer the world, they were so close. But he said, Master said, that Babaji put the thought, and the Himalayan masters put the thought in Hitler's mind to divide his forces between Russia and the European battlefield, and that split his energy, and that was one of the things that led to the fact that we have a free world right now. But these great masters are always at work for the upliftment and benefit and development of our planet. And so we need to align our consciousness with that. It's as though one can think of, perhaps you want to learn how to, let's say, paint. And so you buy some brushes and some material, painting material, and you just try to get something done, and you look and you think, so, not so good. But next door to us, take this image, is a great artist who has spent years and a lifetime mastering his skill. And all we have to do is go next door and say, can you help me? And this great artist will say, I've been watching you out of my window, and I've been waiting for you to ask because I can help you. And this is the role of the great masters. They have been watching us, and they have been waiting. I know when I first met Swamiji, I had just graduated college, 1969, and I read Autobiography of a Yogi, and really not knowing much what my life was going to be. I took a bus, as Swami did, from the Midwest, where I was living, Midwest of America, and came out to Ananda. It was just beginning. And when I didn't know what my life would be. I thought I was just coming to a yoga retreat. And I don't want to frighten any of you who think you're just coming to a yoga retreat. But it was so much more than that. So much more. I listened to Swamiji, and I thought, I didn't know I was looking for this. I thought my life was okay. But when I heard him speak, it was like a window opened. And the artist next door came and said, I've been watching you in your fumbling efforts to find happiness in life, to find meaning in life. And I can see that you really don't know how to find it, but I can help you. And for decades, for thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world, Swamiji just was that divine example and friend and master of the art of knowing God, and the disciple that said, I will show you how to walk the path of discipleship. I will do it through my own example. I will do it through disciplining you when you are off. But we need to understand that there is a current now, and we can tune into it. And our lives will be so enhanced by it, more than we can ever imagine. My family, my birth family, because you are my real family, my birth family in America are good people, dharmic people, but basically materialistic. And they have never really understood what I have done with my life. They tried, but they finally said, better just to stay away. So there wasn't a lot of communication there. But recently, there was a family gathering, and there were members of my family who I haven't seen for 30 years. Because when I came to the spiritual path and joined the ashram, Ananda, they thought, she's very strange. We don't want to, whatever illness she has, we don't want to catch that illness, so we stay away. But then life goes on, and they've had their own difficulties, and I think it's softened their hearts. So there was a family gathering, and they invited Jyotish and me to come after 30 years. And so we said, we'll come happily. But the movie Finding Happiness, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but we got a pirated copy. Please don't report us to the FBI, but anyway, we got it from Shivani. And so we were together for a weekend, and I said, well, we have a little movie about Ananda. Maybe you'd like to see it. And no one said anything, so I thought, all right, we'll let it go. But then it was Sunday after breakfast, and I said, well, we have to drive back now to Ananda. And they said, oh, you had this movie, didn't you? And we said, yes. And they said, well, let's see it. And so I said, we can just watch 10 minutes of it. You can get a visual image of where I've lived for these many years. And we put the DVD in, and they were just enwrapped. No one said a word for the whole 90 minutes. And afterwards, some of them were weeping. And my brother's wife, my sister-in-law, who's a good woman, but not at all aware of what our lives have been, she just said, Swami Kriya, she was weeping, and she said, Swami Kriyananda said we should live our lives to be happy. I have a job. I am so miserable. We don't need the money. I'm going to quit that job, and I'm going to live my life to be happy. And I thought, if that's all they get out of it, that's a wonderful accomplishment. But there's so much more than just quitting a job that makes you unhappy. There's the fountain of joy within us that we can tap into. And someone asked Master Yoganandaji, is this a new religion that you have brought? And he said, no, it's not a new religion. It's a new expression. And then Swami put it another way. Swamiji said, it's a new dispensation. It's a new giving forth of Sanatana Dharma, of the ancient truths of where happiness lies. And as Jyotish was saying, what are the components of this? If we want to say, all right then, how do I tune in to these emerging spiritual trends that have the potential to transform our planet? Well, one, to see the world in a unified way. When you read the news, don't take it at face value, but see what's trying to emerge here. I know for those of us who are from America, you read what's going on with the politics and the economics and so forth, and you think, what happened to the land of the free and the home of the brave? What became of them? But you go beneath that and you see there's the current that's trying to say, me first, what I have for myself is mine and I won't share it with anyone. There's the other current that's saying, we are all brothers and sisters, and we all have to help each other. And they're battling. And when you see it in that way, you gain hope, not discouragement from what's going on. So to see the world in a unified way, to think of life, because every day we find ourselves interacting with other people at work, at family, driving on the road, and to begin seeing, breaking down the ego so we don't just say, my way is right, but to think of a sense of cooperation, to a sense of, I don't always have to dominate my position, my way of thinking. For me, living in a spiritual community for almost 45 years, I can see that transformation in myself on a human level, probably the most dramatic change that has happened. Not spiritually, that's a different story, but on a level of human interaction, the ability to say, my way doesn't have to predominate, doesn't have to prevail. Let me see the larger picture. I had a dream early on in Ananda when Divine Mother was trying to drive this lesson into my mind. And in the dream, I was having an argument with another woman over some issue. And then a third person walked into the dream and looked at me and said, you know, you're not always right. And this was my own dream. And it was like, I got more angry because I thought in my own dream, at least I can be right. But you know what? It's not our dream. It's God's dream. And if we think we need to be right in God's dream, we have a lot of rough road ahead of us because it doesn't work that way. In God's dream, there is a higher truth, and we need to tune into that. And so in working and interacting with each other, to be a part of these emerging spiritual trends, have the ability to just step back a little bit and say, this may be what I think, but what's really the higher principle here? And recently we were working with a group of people on a project, and there was a lot of disagreement, a lot of disharmony. And some of them weren't devotees, some of them were, but it was just very, very challenging. And we tried to be the mediators and ended up ultimately just having everyone be mad at us because everyone wanted us to take their side. And we said, we can't take sides. We're trying to find a reconciliation here. And what someone said to us, actually Jayaji, who many of you know and deeply respect, he said, you know, one of the aspects of human nature that we need to overcome is people would rather be right than accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And that's exactly what was happening. Instead of saying, you know, if we work together, we can really get this done. It was like, no, it's your way or my way. And it was just stuck in the water till we alienated everyone and said it's a compromise. And we were able to get it done, but not without some cost. But so a sense of cooperation. And then I think most important of all is how we tune into emerging spiritual trends from our masters in this new age of Dwapara Yuga is to realize that underneath everything, every aspect of our life, cleaning the house, putting away the laundry, going to our job, cooking a meal, disciplining our children, everything, the presence of God. To try to be aware of that and to realize that there is nothing in life, no place in life where God doesn't exist, no place in our own consciousness. We think, well, that's a little closed door that he doesn't see and I can still be angry in my heart. No, God sees that very clearly. There's a beautiful story of 3 disciples in a guru's ashram, and he says, I'm going to give you all a test now. I'm going to give you each a small banana, and I want you to go and eat that banana in a place where no one can see you. And the 3 of them went off, and the first one, who was more materially minded, said, well, what a foolish thing for the guru to ask me to do. He went around the corner and ate the banana, and he looked around, nobody was there, came back, fine, finished the test the guru had given him. And then the second disciple said, well, you know, you never know who's watching. I'm going to go outside the village. I'm going to go into just on the outskirts where the jungle is beginning. And I know nobody's there. And so he ate his banana and then he came back. But the third disciple, and the guru was teaching the other 2 through this third one, he realized that in the ashram there was a presence that was watching him. Outside the village, there was a presence that he felt, I'm not alone here. He went into the jungle. He still felt, I'm not alone here. He went deeper and deeper in the jungle, and he realized he was always aware of a presence there. And finally, after wee hours of the morning, he returned. The other 2 had long gone to sleep, and he touched his guru's feet, and he said, Master, I have failed in this test. I never could find a place where I didn't feel a presence that was watching me. And the guru woke the other 2 lazy disciples up, and he brought them, and he said, see what a true disciple is like. He knew that God was with him wherever he went. He felt that presence. So we have to have the courage. no matter what the world tells us, no matter if our relatives ignore us for 30 years, to say, this is real to me. This is important to me. My life has no other value without feeling and the presence of God and seeking the presence of God. Jyotish was talking about our pilgrimage to Italy. And we went in the last few days to this very holy place in Italy. It's called La Verna. And it's just very, very remote. And it's where St. Francis used to go and for seclusion and solitude and deep prayer. And it's an amazing place because there are just huge boulders that have kind of caves and boulders that have fallen on top of each other. And you feel like, I don't know, you're not to be like the lazy disciple, but you feel like there's no one else there. But of course, God's there. And St. Francis used to wander up on these little mountain trails far up into the mountain and find a cave and just pray to God and commune with God. And he had many divine visions and experiences there. So there's a little guest cottage that you can stay, and we took our group of people, and there were actually, it's a guest house, there were 50 of us, and we just had 2 days there in silence, pretty much, and just to go into the different chapels. And then one morning, Jyotish and I saw this little trail going up into the mountain. And so we began going there, and we didn't really know where it was leading, but it went up and up and up into the mountain, and hours went by, and we were still up in the mountain. And we realized these were the little forest trails, mountain trails that St. Francis would take. And then we got to the top, and there was a little stone chapel there where Francis would pray. And you could look off and you could just see very, very far. And we just sat there for a long time. And there was such a presence of freedom and God's presence. And I really prayed, Lord, don't ever let me forget this experience. Let me remember when I go back into the marketplace, go back into the world, get back on the train and all the things that you have to do. Let me try to have that song of God singing all the time in my heart, the way St. Francis did, that great saint that came and brought deep spirituality back to the West again. And so in this new age, we need to have the courage to say, I don't care what the world tells me. I don't care what the religious conflict, the political confusion. I am living for God. And there is a power behind me. There is a wind in my sails. And that wind is divine grace that is blowing into the world at this time. And as Master said, if we can hoist our sails and keep them full, Master said that the path to God is 25% our own effort, 25% the Guru's intercession on our behalf, and 50% the grace of God. But the 25% that's our own effort, that doesn't mean 25% of what we have to give. It means 100% of what we have to give. And that means we hoist our sails so they can catch all the wind of grace that's blowing into the world now. And if we can do that as individuals, as a Sangha, as disciples of Master worldwide, we, just as those artists in the Renaissance, their enthusiasm redefined Western civilization. Through the grace of Guruji and God and our great masters and our receptivity and our effort, we too can bring about a new time of spirituality for people everywhere. So God bless you all. Okay, I'm going to do something very mean. I'm looking at Shamini. Shamini, you spent how much? 2 months?
3.5.
3.5 months at Ananda Village. How would you feel if I asked you to come up and talk for 2 minutes about what you learned there? Okay?
Okay. So I went to Ananda Village over summer. That's
where Jyotish and Devi sort of live now. We're so happy you live in India too now. But and I was there doing the Karma Yoga program there, and I also did a little bit of what we call experience Ananda. So I tried to learn a little from, they have a very established web team and marketing team, and so I tried to learn a little from a little bit of the departments and the businesses that they have, and try to see how I could possibly help wherever I get a chance to be with Ananda. And I feel with the Karma Yoga program there, it's very established over many years. And it was a great experience for me because I feel like I'm new relatively. I've been on the path. I found Ananda a year ago. And it was great to learn just to understand, like Jyotish was saying, Master said, how service and meditation is the main part of our path. And so just learning and really understanding what it means to serve. And we get so many opportunities to serve through Ananda, and just really understanding how to move out of your little self and understand what it means to serve. So that was something I really appreciate and value from that experience over summer. And other than that, it was just wonderful meeting all of our other Guru Bhais, and any of you, if you get a chance to go, you should definitely go there and spend some time at the village, because it's just amazing and beautiful. And yeah, that was basically it.
Fantastic.
So you know what's coming unless you ask a question.
Who's next?
Is it true that you've written a book recently?
No.
It's going to be published.
We are in the process of working on several books, actually. We're in the process of work. Thank you, Darna, for asking that question. He asked, is it true we've written a book recently? And I have to say no, because we have not written it, completed it yet. But we're compiling both the material and the clarity of approach to write a book. The title of it, which Swami approved just weeks before he passed, was The Life of Swami Kriyananda, Completing the Mission of Paramahansa Yogananda. So just, not in part it's biographical, but it's more to show how each of, so much of Swami's experiences as a young person, and of course after meeting Master, and in previous lives as well, all positioned him in such a way to complete the great work that Yogananda started. And Swamiji was such a humble, self-effacing person, never put himself forward, but looking at his accomplishments from our perspective now of not having him in the body anymore, you just realize what he was able to accomplish really was not humanly possible. Divinely possible, yes, but not humanly possible. And you realize what a great work. As Master said, you have a great work to do, and he fulfilled that work. And so we're going to try to just show how all the different threads of Master's life, Kriya, education, dharmic living, uniting East and West, communities, health and healing, all of these, how Swami brought these to fulfillment. So we're working on that book. And then a smaller book that we're working on. For those of you who might know or might not know, Jyotish and I have a weekly, brief little blog called Touch of Light. And it just comes out every Friday, and one just came out yesterday, and we alternate writing. And so if you'd like to get it, they're very short, 350 to 400 words. It's just really a touch of light. If you would like to receive it, you can subscribe, go to ananda.org, then go to Touch of Light newsletter. But many people have started writing us and said, we love these things. Can we compile them into a book so that these will be published in a little book as well? So that's the answer to that question.
Is there also a book like a, what do they call, coffee table?
Yes.
There's just going to be released a coffee table book that is fairly large size, and it's on the, I've forgotten the title.
Swami Kriyananda, A Life in God.
Yeah, Swami Kriyananda, Life in God, and it's got many photos of Swami through the years, but the main text are taken from his lectures and writings, and it's covers many different topics, and then has a lecture or some piece of writing in which Swamiji addresses that particular topic, and that's just at the printers now. I don't know whether it's going to be released here in India. It probably will, but it is a relatively expensive book because it's thick and has a lot of pictures, and so it really is meant for a slightly smaller market of those people who have been touched by and treasure Swamiji's life.
You know, also I'll mention that last January and February, so that was still this year, 2013, we were here in India, and we began the filming of the biography film of Swamiji's life called The Answer, and Shurjo and Narayani filmed in Calcutta and Mumbai with Swamiji, and then the rest of Swami just wrote the script. He just was present as in the film at the very beginning and then towards the end, and so we were able to film all those scenes here. It was as though he was completing every aspect that he wanted to do before he left the body in April. But then last July, the film crew, it's an Indian film crew, director and production and chief cinematographer, they came to Ananda village for 5 weeks, and they filmed the great majority of it, and it really was extraordinary. They were able to hire the well-known Bengali actor Victor Banerjee to play Yoganandaji, and and he took it very seriously. He said, "This isn't just a part for me to play Yogananda." He said, who could do this? And he said, "I will do the very best I am capable." But they had a special wig maker that made a wig like Yogananda's beautiful thick hair, and then it was very, very hot at that time. I don't have to tell you here about being hot, but they had a special polyethylene bodysuit that he had to wear to make him look a little more portly, and he had the orange robes, and he came out on the scene, and everyone, just our breath was taken away, because it was like, oh my word, it's Master. And he would walk, or we recreated a lot of the sets for where Swami was with Master. We hired a young, very sweet actor to play Swamiji as a young man, because we felt that there weren't any devotees that were really good enough actors to do it on a professional level. But he was a very sweet young man, and he went from Los Angeles. He went to our Ananda Center in Los Angeles and learned how to meditate, took Ananda Yoga, Hatha Yoga. So we tried to give him a crash course in tuning into Swami's vibration. But the interplay between Victor as Yoganandaji and this young actor as Swamiji, they did a beautiful job of presenting the guru-disciple relationship. And so the film is all filmed now. It's in post-production now. The director, Pavan Kaul, is doing the editing now in Mumbai, and we hope it will be out sometime
in a few months.
Yeah, sometime early next year. So anyway, it was so much fun to watch them recreate these scenes from Swamiji's life. And we were telling Narayani and Shurjo, for those of you who have read The New Path, Swami's autobiography, there's the wonderful scene where he's just a 22-year-old boy, and Master says, "I want you to go and lecture." He'd only been with Master a few months. Lecture on my behalf at the church in San Diego. And Swamiji had never lectured before, and they were all expecting Master, and he had to go and give the lecture. But the way they recreated it in the film was really quite extraordinary. We have a beautiful little chapel at Crystal Hermitage, where Swami had his residence in America, beautiful gardens there. And it looked sort of like the San Diego church. But what they did to make it seem more ethereal, Jyotish and I have had a crash course in film production now, so we speak with great authority. But you know how sometimes in movie sets or movies they kind of make a mist on the ground. I think it's some kind of gas that they put. So they had this sort of cloud-like mist, and they had people that you just saw them from the back, but they were dressed in the style of the 1940s. And then Swamiji, as this young monk, came up, and he was, tentative and hesitant because they were all expecting Master. And just at that moment, I mean, we couldn't have planned this. This beautiful shaft of sunlight came in through a high window, and it shone right on the young man playing Swamiji, and it just illumined him, and that light just, all that kind of smoky cloud on the floor that all became just radiant, and it was like, oh my goodness, what just happened here? And so it was like God and Guruji were really making this movie very, very special, and I know it'll be very well received here in India. So.
Okay, well, I think we'll break at this point, and there will be tea served, and then for those who haven't had a chance, there will be a tour of the community, and then lunch at 1 o'clock.
And then we'll have another satsang with you. 3, okay.
You all know our schedule better than we do. Okay, thank you.